The people who lived in the bunker discovered strange machines 90 meters high underground, left over from the last civilization, and understand that it was with their help that their shelter was created.
10,000 lives depend on them.
Hello, friends. Today we continue the retelling of the series Shelter from the 3rd to the 5th series. You will find a link to the retelling of the first 2 episodes in the description. Hanging over the abyss, Juliet still decides not to take any chances and returns to the playground, where they pull out alcohol, and commemorates her dead friend, and then puts his watch on her hand. Mayor Ruth is also saddened by what happened and asks Deputy Sheriff Marnes to find Juliet quickly, who is recovering at this time, overcoming a hangover. But then the dishes begin to vibrate, sure sign of a generator failure, and Juliet hurries to her workplace. Meanwhile, Marines notices that the thermos in Ruth's bag is leaking, and gives her his. Running to the place, Juliet rudely throws her young assistant away from the generator, which causes outrage of her boss. She insists on stopping the generator completely. If it breaks, no one can fix it, and then the dungeon will simply die. Meanwhile, Ruth and Marnes come to the head of the IT sphere of the bunker, the second person after the mayor. The man is not enthusiastic about Juliet's candidacy for the sheriff's seat. She stole electrical tape for the needs of her service. The chief judge is also against it, but Holson chose her. After the conversation, Ruth and Mars go to the middle level, where the woman is cordially welcomed, as they love her very much. The mayor traditionally bypasses the newborns, and then starts a conversation with Dr. Nicholson, Juliet's father, who says that his daughter was down because she loved mechanics from childhood, and they do not maintain a relationship. Meanwhile, Juliet tells Martha about her horror of the mass of water below, and the mayor and the assistant have lunch in the park. Marines admits that he is ready to retire when Assistant Judge Sims appears in front of them, who has his own candidacy for the position of sheriff. And below, the shaking starts again, and the mayor witnesses how Juliet works, after which he meets with her. Juliet is stunned by the offer. Her job is much more important, and she doesn't want to be a sheriff. The mayor hands her the sheriff's badge Holston left just for her. Juliet discovers the engraving on the back of the badge and catches up with the mayor. She is ready to accept the position, but before leaving she has to fix the generator, for which it needs to be turned off for a while. The mayor has to agree. A warning is being carried around the bunker, which scares people. Juliet explains exactly what is broken and how to fix it, but they only have an hour for everything. Repairmen carefully develop a work plan, because if something goes wrong, victims are possible. Juliet takes her assistant with her, which makes the guy ecstatic. And now it's dark in the bunker, the generator is stopped, the external panels are removed from it. Repairmen are lifted to the place of breakdown. Juliet finds a broken blade, detaches it and lowers it down. The rest they have to fix on the spot. Meanwhile, Ruth and Marnes worry about a possible accident. If the generator cannot be repaired, groundwater will rise, and people will inevitably die. And then Ruth admits that she is ready to leave her position and settle down next to a pensioner. Marnes kisses her. And the situation on the generator is heating up. Juliet has to go inside the car to cool it with water. She is covered with her head when the blade finally puts it in place. The exhausted, choking Juliet is pulled out, the generator is started, and it starts working as it should, which causes the entire bunker to rejoice. The lights turn on, which means life goes on. After all, Juliet comes to Martha and gives her the rarity George found with a request to figure out what it is, and it's time for her to go upstairs to start her new job. She says goodbye to her friends and, turning over the Holston badge, reads the word truth on the back, while the mayor signs his resignation. But then the woman feels unwell and goes to the toilet while the assistant chooses wine for the evening. But the noise of a fall is heard outside the door, and after breaking the doors, he finds Labor on the floor with a bloody mouth. Juliet remembers how as a child she helped to pump her brother after an attack of illness, and how happy she was when the boy came to his senses. And then she is called to the mayor's office. She goes there and witnesses a dispute between Bernard, Mars and Sims. Mars is sure that the criminal poisoned the water in Ruth's thermos with rat poison somewhere on the average level. Everyone knew that the mayor was going to bypass the bunker. And everyone knew that Walking takes a bottle from a companion's backpack simply because it is inconvenient to climb into his own. And if Ruth's bottle hadn't leaked, he would be lying on the floor right now. Then the men notice Juliet. Bernard is forced to take it without an oath, because he also stands up for the post of mayor, observing the charter, without having passed the elections. The woman sees how Mars is grieving, and again remembers her childhood. Her father asks her to pack her mother's and brother's things, because someone may need them. In the present, Juliet is walking through the dining room, paying attention to a lonely man sitting at the table, when the sheriff's secretary calls out to her. The woman escorts her to the office and tells her about the rules. Juliet asks to bring George's body and inspects the office and the cell, from the window of which you can see the tree under which Holston and his wife found their rest. And then, after going to her new home, she remembers her childhood again, when she brought her relative's thing to the sorting point, where the receptionist sympathizes with her. Later, the girl cooks her own food, and then repairs a long broken chair. And when her father comes, she breaks down. Why is she going through all this alone? The girl cries, hugging her brother's toy, and the father apologizes for the fact that not everything can be repaired. Adult Juliet wakes up from a knock on the door. Bernard is ready to take her oath. Later, she searches Holston's office and finds out that the sheriff left George's case on his desk especially for her. And then there are reports of an incident with Mars. She runs to the middle level, where a former sheriff's deputy beats up a man he suspects of poisoning Ruth. She takes him to the dining room, where she tells him about her suspicions in the case of George's murder, that the sheriff promised to give her a sign if he finds something, and shows the sheriff's badge. Marnes agrees to cooperate. They go to a man named Kennedy, whom Marnes also added to his list. The man rushes into a fight. Juliet has to separate them, and then help Mars. Juliet tries to find the hard drive that George gave to the sheriff, and Mars advises to go to the vault, and then admits that he had enough enemies who wanted him dead. After seeing Ruth's portrait on his wall, she understands about the man's true feelings and agrees to leave the post after they find the mayor. The action takes place in the past, when Juliet packed up her things and left the house downstairs, where she provided a note asking to be accepted by a repairman, allegedly written by her father. Martha quickly understands what's going on, but the stubborn girl turns out to be in the raking team. Every 5 minutes, junk is dumped here, among which you need to find something that can be repaired. And it's very hard work. An adult Juliet is greeted by a storage attendant, but she does not remember among the things of Holston, an old disc and a stack of papers. The past again. Juliet goes to Martha, where her father is waiting for her. The girl is happy because she gets so exhausted during the day that she has no time to think about her lost loved ones. And here she is in her place. Martha accepts a girl. In the present, Marnes builds a homemade pear and takes out all his pain on it. But Sims is knocking on the door. He found out that Mars beat up a man who was accused of illegal trade in homemade alcohol, from which many suffered at that time, and then reports that the judge is ready to remove the new sheriff from office, which Mars advises not to hurry, because Holston chose her. And the sheriff herself meets a man in the dining room. Lucas turns out to be one of those who read the play from which the woman got her name. After seeing Sims off, Marnes remembers the work and then hears Juliet and Martha talking over a closed connection, where the sheriff admits that she has found an assistant, and Martha says that she has something worth looking at. Juliet promises to look in on her and goes home, where she notices a knock on the fan. Marnes also goes to his room, where someone attacks him in the dark. The men struggle, but the attacker takes away Mars' gun, and Juliet, opening the fan grill, finds a package with George's real case inside. The woman is rereading the dossier when she is called to Mars' house, where his body is already being examined by Sims and new Deputy Sheriff Paul Billings. Bernard asks everyone to his office. But Juliet stays, inspects the scene and finds a piece of paper with a list of suspects in the pocket of the deceased. Later, she offers to bury the couple together. According to the statute, this is not allowed, but on the other hand, the romantic component will distract attention from the murders, and then a race to the top will be announced in memory of the mayor. People will get sick, drink beer and get distracted. Later, the burial ceremony takes place. Ruth and Marnes are buried in the same grave. Bernard makes a speech, after which Juliet speaks with her usual directness about her attitude to her appointment. But she will be faithful to her duty to the end. In the final part, all the visitors take a bite from the apple, throwing the core into the grave. Let a new tree grow out of the remains, giving life. Returning to her office, Juliet finds there a lawyer from the lower level, Hank, who is worried about her, as, indeed, everyone below, and reminds her that he is always ready to help. Later, the secretary again reminds her that Holston is the best of sheriffs for her. And she also understands that Juliet agreed to accept the position only in order to find out the truth about George's death. She is ready to help, but only for a return service. Juliet needs to find out who really killed Marnes, because the justice judge doesn't care. For her, the main thing is to maintain order, so she will hang the crime on whoever turns up. Then Juliet will be squeezed out, and a person pleasing to the lawyer will be put in her place. Juliet goes to investigate the circumstances of Mars' death. The secretary advises to take Paul with her, otherwise the woman may make a mistake, because of which the lawyers will not accept any evidence. But when she reaches the level, she lets Paul go to lunch, and she remembers the recent altercation between Mars and Kennedy, whose name is on the list of the former assistant, and goes to him. He is not at home, and Juliet opens the door lock, searches the apartment and finds a box of poison and a drawing of Ruth, which used to hang on the wall of Mars. Meanwhile, Paul goes to Sims, who introduces him to the candidate for his assistant, Doug. Meanwhile, Juliet finds Kennedy and, after talking to him, leads him to a safe place, after which she meets with Paul, who admits that Sims suspects a man named Ralph, whose name is also on the list of the former assistant. But unexpectedly for everyone, Juliet asks for a warrant for Kennedy's arrest. The secretary does not understand what is happening, and then Juliet explains, Paul got a name from the lawyers, so they decided to frame him. But during the search, Kennedy will find a drawing in poison. Thus, the sheriff will be incompetent, and she will be removed, putting Paul in her place. She runs to Kennedy's apartment, where she meets Doug and, accusing him of tampering with evidence, tries to arrest him, but he rushes to run, Juliet after him. Everything is complicated by the race to the top that has begun. In the crowd, Duck throws the woman over the stone railing, but she manages to grab them and hangs over the abyss. Duck tries to tear off her hands, she pulls out a knife, but drops it, and when it seems that she will inevitably break, a girl from the crowd notices her. Duck runs away, and Juliet is picked up by passers-by who came to the rescue. Meanwhile, Duck goes to Sims in his secret apartment. He is unhappy, he should not know about this place. And then, after learning about his failure, he asks to see a note prepared for Kennedy, where he writes about his desire to take his own life and tells him about his father, a janitor. My father was a silent man and never gave away his thoughts. But one day, when the little Sims was completely overwhelmed by a classmate, the offender's family suddenly moved somewhere. And one day his father showed him this door and promised to take the guy as an assistant. It was only now that Sims realized what his father was really doing. Doug has danced twice with George and now with Kennedy. He is ready to make a choice of an assistant. Sims takes his oath, and then throws the man down. He doesn't need losers. Later, Juliet tells the judge about everything, and a note found in Doug's pocket confirms that he himself drew the line. She thanks the woman for her service and orders to close the case. Bernard apologizes for not trusting her, and Juliet asks for the weekend to go downstairs to get her things. At night, passing through the dining room, she sees Lucas again, who draws her attention to the heavenly lights, which also move in certain orbits, but no one knows what it is. Juliet goes down to Martha, asks her questions about these lights, but she has no idea what it is about. But she is ready to show the knife that fell to them from above. The woman is concerned about Juliet's safety and tells about the artifact that Juliet left her. But her magnifying glass is too weak, and a stronger one forbids doing the charter. Martha does not understand why they cannot make means of moving along the horizons. They don't even have regular elevators. It is strictly forbidden to increase the capacity of mechanisms, so she faces death for this artifact. But Juliet doesn't want to give up her new business. They finally believed her and are ready to work with her. Then she'll find out exactly what happened to George. But this requires bait, and Jules goes to the lower cave and takes the artifact out of George's box. Despite the many films made recently about people surviving in post-apocalyptic conditions, this series is distinguished by a mysterious narrative and quite interesting plot twists. What kind of civilization made this bunker, and why can't those who have gone outside breathe, apparently, clean air? There are new series and new discoveries ahead.